sweet friends. I'm Mary Bryant Shrader, author of the Modern Pioneer Cookbook and now the Modern Pioneer Pantry. You may also simply know me as Mary from marysnest.com and creator of the Mary's Nest YouTube channel. Now, I'd like to welcome you to my kitchen today, and I also want to thank Melissa's Produce for inviting me to have you come into my kitchen while I share some recipes with you from the Modern Pioneer Pantry. The Modern Pioneer is your complete guide to preserving food, but it's so much more than that. It's 115 recipes on how to preserve food and then how to use the food you preserve to make nutritious and delicious meals. And in the Modern Pioneer Pantry, I first start you off with teaching you all about what I like to call the Four Corners Pantry system, which I'll explain in a minute. But then we move on to learning all about home canning, how to water bath can and how to pressure can. And I've got lots of wonderful recipes for you that are very easy and also very tasty. Then we move on to drying and dehydrating food. And a lot of foods can be air dried as well as oven dried, so you don't always need an electric dehydrator. Then I show you what a boon it is to your pantry to have dried and dehydrated foods on hand that can make meal prep very easy. Then we move on to the chapter all about fermentation. And if you've never fermented foods before, I'm going to show you that it can be easy, and with a few little tips and tricks that I share with you, that you can be very assured that your ferment is perfect and safe to eat. From fermented foods, we move on to a chapter on how to freeze food properly. And in this chapter, I also show you how to freeze complete meals and how to do it properly so that when you take them out of your freezer and turn them into breakfast, lunch, or dinner, they are really tasty and no one is ever going to guess that those were frozen meals. Then I also show you how to pickle food. And pickling is a wonderful way to get you very comfortable in eventually advancing on to fermentation, because the skills you learn in pickling are very similar to the skills you're going to need to make fermented foods. And when it comes to pickling food, we're not just talking about maybe making pickles or some pickled onions. I show you how to make a whole host of foods that you're going to be very surprised can be extremely tasty when pickled. And I even share with you my favorite recipe for a pickled cough medicine. And although not technically pickling, but more curing, I show you how to cure a beef brisket to make your own homemade corned beef without any chemicals. Because that's what's so important to me and why I wrote the Modern Pioneer Cookbook and now the Modern Pioneer Pantry. I want to keep these skills alive for how to make a whole host of foods homemade and natural. Now, I just want to back up for a minute and review with you what I mean when I say the Four Corners Pantry system. That's how I start out the Modern Pioneer Pantry, because everything in the Modern Pioneer Pantry is going to teach you how to stock the four corners of your pantry. Because when I use the term pantry, it's much broader than what we traditionally think of. By the Four Corners Pantry system, what I'm referring to is number one, the first corner is your working pantry, the closet or cupboard, whatever the case may be that you have in your kitchen that you access on a regular basis when you need non-perishable foods. Your second corner is your refrigerator, your third corner is your freezer, and your fourth corner is your extended pantry, or what some of us nickname the prepper pantry. And that's where we store our backup non-perishable foods that allows us to restock our working pantry when our food runs low. The nice thing about an extended pantry is that this is where you can store foods that you get on sale or that you get a good buy on at the farmer's market, and then you come home and home can, and then you can add those to your extended pantry so that when foods run low in your working pantry, you're not worrying about running out to the grocery store. You can just shop your extended pantry. And in the Modern Pioneer Pantry, I teach you these various forms of food preservation that allow you to stock each of your Four Corners pantry successfully so that you're always prepared to make nutritious meals. As I mentioned earlier, I teach you home canning, I teach you drying and dehydrating, I teach you fermentation, freezing, and pickling. So you're all prepared to stock all four corners of your Four Corners pantry system. Well, today I've got a couple of recipes I'm going to share with you from the Modern Pioneer Pantry. Now, if you've got my cookbook, you can turn to page 189 and we're going to make fermented strawberry soda. Now, in the Modern Pioneer Pantry, I make this with strawberries, but you can make fermented fruit soda with pretty much any berry that you have on hand or that's in season. You can also use other fruits as well. Just as long as you follow this basic method, you'll be on your way to making pretty much any type of fermented soda that you want. And what's great about this particular ferment is it's very easy to make. And it's tasty. And once you make this soda, it's going to be hard for you to buy soda at the grocery store because there's nothing like homemade fermented soda. It's very rich in good bacteria, probiotics, which are great for gut health. And as scientists tell us, good gut health means good overall health. So the more good bacteria that we can get into our diet, the better. And what better way to do it than with a delicious fermented soda? Now, to make a fermented strawberry soda, you're going to want 6 cups of sliced strawberries. Now, whatever fruit you're using, you're going to want 6 cups. If it's a larger fruit like a strawberry or an apple, a peach, pear, so on and so forth, you just want to have it sliced. If it's a small berry like a blueberry, blackberry, raspberry, those you can just fill your cup and not worry about any cutting up. Next, you're going to want the juice of 1 lemon, and you're going to want 1/3 cup of sugar. We're going to talk about the sugar in a minute, but let's get to the last ingredient we're going to need to make this fermented strawberry soda, and that is something called a ginger bug. Whenever you want to make a homemade fermented soda, it's best to start it with what's known as a ginger bug. And I include a recipe in the Modern Pioneer Pantry for how to make a ginger bug so you can always be prepared to make homemade fermented sodas. But I'm also going to share with you today how to do this. Making a ginger bug is very easy. All you're going to do is grate some ginger, add a little water and a little white sugar, and you're going to cover it, and then you're going to leave it on your counter for a day. And then the next day, you're going to do the same. You're going to add a little grated ginger, a little more water, a little bit of sugar, and you're going to let it rest again on your counter. You're going to do this for 5 days. After 5 days, you're going to have a beautiful, in essence, fermented ginger that's going to be all bubbly, full of good bugs, good bacteria, rich in probiotics, and ready to do its job to ferment your strawberries and turn them into a fermented soda. Now, before we make this fermented strawberry soda, I want to say a word about the sugar. I often get a lot of questions when it comes to different fermentations like this. Can I use a different type of sugar, a different type of sweetener? And the answer is yes. You can certainly use sucanat, or some of you may know it as rapadura, depending on where you live in the world. It's simply the sugarcane juice that's been dried into crystals. It has all of the nutrients still intact and has not been, and those nutrients have not been stripped out the way they are with white sugar. You could also use coconut sugar, maple sugar, date sugar, any sugar like that, or any sweetener like that. However, depending on which one you use, it will slightly change the taste as well as the color of your fermented soda. And depending where you are on your traditional foods journey, that may matter to you. If you're at the very beginning of your traditional foods journey and you're trying to transition to consuming fermented foods and you want them to look as familiar to you as possible, and especially, that's my pup if you're hearing the jingling, you want And you want them to look as similar to what you might buy at the grocery store, especially if you're feeding your family and you're trying to get them to transition to traditional foods. It can sometimes be best if it looks very familiar. And if you use these alternative sweeteners, sometimes the food will be a different color and won't look as familiar or as inviting as if you had just used white sugar. Now, I do want to share something with you in defense of using white sugar when it comes to making a fermented soda. During the process of fermentation, the good bacteria is going to gobble up a lot of this sugar and use it as food that creates the fermentation. So in the end, the soda isn't getting so much of its sweetness from white sugar, it's getting its sweetness from the fruit. Fermented soda has a very fruity flavor because it's relying on the fruit for a lot of its sweetness, because the good bacteria during the fermentation process has eaten up a lot of this white sugar. So don't feel too bad about using white sugar when you're making a homemade fermented soda. Now, the first step for making a fermented strawberry soda is to put all of your strawberries, your sugar, and your lemon juice into a food processor or a blender. I like using a food processor, but if you want to use a blender, that's fine too. You may just have to stop it periodically and scrape down the sides so that everything is beautifully pureed. I've got my strawberries in the food processor. Now I'm just going to go ahead and add in this sugar, and then we've got the lemon juice too. Now we're going to blend this just until it's a beautiful smooth puree. Now that the strawberries are beautifully pureed, you're going to want to get a big bowl and a colander or a mesh strainer, whatever you have, and then some type of clean cloth or cheesecloth. I really like these what they call flour sack towels. I use these for a variety of kitchen tasks, and they work perfectly when you want to strain something like a puree where you want just the juice. Then once we've got our colander lined with this flour sack towel or cheesecloth, whatever you have, we're going to go ahead and pour our strawberry puree right into our lined colander. I'm just going to get a little spatula here to get out every little last bit of goodness. We'll just go ahead and set this aside for a little bit while the juice from the puree drains down into the bowl. Now, while that's draining, I want to talk to you about all of these strawberry tops that I removed when I was slicing the strawberries. Now, I'm a huge proponent of a no-waste kitchen, or at least a low-waste kitchen, and I don't want to throw out these strawberry tops. What I'm going to show you to do with these is to make a fruit scrap vinegar. In this case, it's a strawberry scrap vinegar. Vinegars like this can often be sold in gourmet stores and be on the expensive side, but I'm going to show you how to take these scraps and turn them into some of the nicest tasting vinegar you've ever had. Now, to make this strawberry scrap vinegar, you're going to want a half-gallon glass jar. Then you're just going to go ahead, take your scraps, and put them into your jar. Once you get your strawberry top scraps into your jar, you're going to want to go ahead and add a 1/4 cup of sugar. And that white sugar is going to serve as food for the good bacteria during the fermentation process of making this vinegar. Now, I want to address 2 questions that I often get when it comes to fermentation and using sweeteners, whether it's the white sugar or some of the alternative sweeteners we mentioned earlier. I will often get the question, number 1, can I use stevia or some sort of low-cal or no-cal sweetener? And unfortunately, no, that won't work because that doesn't provide any food for the good bacteria to eat. And the second question is, can I use honey? And yes, you can use honey. Now, people will often say, yes, but honey is an antibacterial, it'll kill the good bacteria. But that's not true. Yes, honey is an antibacterial, but it kills bacteria through suffocation. So if you mix the honey in water, the good bacteria will gobble it up as food. It can no longer suffocate the good bacteria because it's been diluted in the water. So yes, you can use honey. And if in making this vinegar, it makes you feel better to use an alternative sweetener that will darken the final product, the vinegar, or honey, which if you use like a clover honey, a light colored honey, it won't affect the color as much. But again, there is going to be some changes in taste. However, if that makes you feel more comfortable, you can certainly do that. But trust me, after the fermentation process involved to make vinegar, you're not going to taste any sugar. This is not going to be sweet. The good bacteria is going to gobble this up over a 30-day process that it takes to make a fruit scrap vinegar. Next, you're going to go ahead and just add some water to this. If you have water that doesn't contain chlorine, all the better, because chlorine can interfere with the fermentation process. It's not the end of the world, so don't worry if all you have available to you is tap water. But if you have some sort of filtered water or chlorine-free water, that'll work very well. Now, I'm only going to fill this up to about that point because as this ferments, sometimes things can bubble up and spill over. So often when it comes to ferments, I often recommend putting them into a bowl like this that can help avoid making a mess. So that's up to you, but something that I generally recommend. Now, once you get this into your jar, you just want to take a wooden spoon, clean of course. What I'm going to use is a chopstick, and I'm just going to give this a spin to help some of that sugar dissolve into the water. Alrighty, now that that sugar is dissolved, the next thing you're going to want to do is get a paper towel or a clean cloth. Those little frilly coffee filters can work very well too, and you're simply going to cover your vinegar and you're going to use a rubber band to keep this on top. This will help keep out any dust and flying bugaboos, whatever the case may be. Now, this is known as an aerobic fermentation, one that requires air to have this fermentation process take place. There's also anaerobic fermentation, which means without air, and that's often seen when you make fermented vegetables like sauerkraut, where you put them in a jar with the vegetable and the salt and you weigh it all down and then you put the lid on to keep air out. That's an anaerobic. This is an aerobic fermentation, and they use different types of good bacteria and yeasts to create the fermented product. On one, it's the good bacteria that's already occurring on the vegetable. In this one, it's the good bacteria and yeast in the air that are helping this process along. Now you're going to want to put this somewhere in your kitchen, out of direct sunlight, because ferments don't like extreme temperature changes, but you're going to want to put it in a place in your kitchen, out of direct sunlight. Aerobic fermentations like this aren't super temperature sensitive the same way that anaerobic ferments are, but generally somewhere between 68 degrees Fahrenheit and 72 degrees Fahrenheit is a great place in terms of a temperature range for fermentation to occur. A little cooler, a little warmer, it's not a big deal, but 68 degrees Fahrenheit to 72 degrees Fahrenheit is the sweet spot. Now, when it comes to making vinegar, a homemade fruit scrap vinegar like this, twice a day, you're going to want to remove your little cap and you're going to want to give this a stir. And that just helps redistribute all of the fruit if there's any that's kind of coming to the top, and just to aerate it, to get some good yeast and bacteria, good bacteria that are in the air into your vinegar in the making to help the whole process along. Now, if you forget, don't worry about it. Just stir it when you remember. And if you find you can only remember stirring it once a day, that's fine too. These type of fermentations are very forgiving. And then what's beautiful is within a few days, you're going to start to see little bubbles working up their way up the sides, coming up to the top. You may see the level kind of rising because of the fermentation. You may see kind of what looks like a foam forming on top. It's a lot of fun to watch, and you know that you are on a successful route to fermenting this, to creating your vinegar. And after 30 days, you're going to use your colander or your mesh strainer over a bowl lined with a cheesecloth, and you're going to strain out the strawberry scraps, and you're going to have a magnificent strawberry vinegar. Now, the strawberries are going to be quite spent, or the strawberry scraps at that point are going to be quite spent, a little bit mushy, and so on and so forth. You will discover this when you go through the vinegar making process. At that point, you can simply discard them, or if you want to do the type of things my mom did, who never wasted anything, you can put them in a blender and puree them, and then do something that's known as cold composting, where you dig a hole in your garden, in your kitchen garden, and you basically bury the strawberry scrap puree. And what's ever left in those strawberries, and including the good bacteria that's clinging to them, will help feed your garden. Now, coming back to the strawberry soda, the fermented strawberry soda, we're going to go ahead and gather up, it's a little messy, but we're going to go ahead and gather up our cheesecloth, and we're just going to start squeezing our puree into our mesh strainer or our colander, whatever you have, and you're just going to continue to do this to get every little last bit of liquid out of your puree. Now, the reason we're straining this through the cheesecloth or the flour sack towel, whatever you have, is because we want to get out all those little seeds. We don't want those seeds in our strawberry soda. It's a little bit of a messy job, but it's actually kind of fun. It's great if you have kids in the house too, because they'll love really squeezing that and getting every last little bit of the strawberry puree out of this mixture. Now, to make our strawberry soda, we need 4 cups of liquid. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is measure this puree, this strained puree that we've got all the seeds out of. I'm going to measure this into a 4-cup measuring cup. Boy, when you make this, you're just going to love it. The aroma is so amazing. Now, with a clean utensil, you just want to scoop out some of your ginger bug into a 1/4 cup measure. Then you're going to go ahead and add the ginger bug to your strawberry puree. Now you want to take a clean whisk and just give this a little stir to incorporate that ginger bug throughout the puree. Now we're going to take some water. As I mentioned, it's the same as with the vinegar in the making. We want to use filtered or chlorine-free water. If you don't have it, again, it's not the end of the world. It just may slightly affect the fermentation process. But you're going to want to go ahead and add in water until you get to 4 cups. We need 4 cups total in liquid. Again, I'm just going to give this another stir just to get the water all throughout, mixed well with the puree and the ginger bug. Now you want to go ahead and pour your entire mixture into a 1/2 gallon jar. Then you want to go ahead, get a lid, put this on your jar, tighten it, and then you want to put this in an area out of direct sunlight, approximately 68 degrees Fahrenheit to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. As I mentioned earlier, like with the vinegar, a little cooler, a little warmer. It's not the end of the world, but that is the sweet spot. After about 24 hours, you may start to see a little bubbling. And that's a good sign that the fermentation process is beginning. After the first day, on the second day, you're going to start seeing even more bubbles and more of the fermentation process taking place. You can taste the soda at that point. You may like the level of effervescence that it has and the level of sweetness. If so, it's time to decant. If you want it a little more tangy and a little more stronger effervescent, then you're going to let it ferment for the 3rd day and even up to the 4th day. Generally, whenever you're fermenting fruit, you really don't want to go past 3 or 4 days because it can at that point start turning more alcohol flavored or vinegar flavored. By the 4th day, it should be beautifully fizzy and have a wonderful flavor. And now, when you get ready to decant it, all you're going to want to do is decant it into some sort of pitcher or bowl using a mesh strainer. You don't need the flour sack towel at this point because all you're going to be doing is straining out the ginger, which has been shredded and is going to be larger than the tight mesh of a mesh strainer. Now, if you like the idea of having a little bit of that grated ginger in the bottom of the bottle in which you decant your strawberry soda, you don't need to worry about using the mesh strainer. You can just go ahead, put a funnel on a bottle, and start to decant your strawberry soda, your fermented strawberry soda, and whatever little bits of grated ginger get into the bottle is fine. It also, as you refrigerate it, will add a little bit more of a ginger kick to the final product. Now I'm going to put this out of the way and let it continue to ferment, and I'm going to show you what the final product looks like. Once you've decanted your strawberry soda, your fermented strawberry soda, it's ready to go into the fridge. Now in a bottle like this with a screw on top, it will stay effervescent for a few days, and I'm fine with that. But if you want it to stay effervescent for longer, then you're going to need some type of swing top bottle. But if you decide to use one of these, you want to make sure that they are specifically made for decanting effervescent beverages. We consider things like fermented strawberry soda a treat, so I'm happy to put it in a bottle like this, and we'll enjoy it over the next few days while it's still effervescent. These bottles always make me a little nervous, but if you do use a swing top bottle that is made for decanting effervescent beverages, I recommend that you do put this into some type of container, or if you have smaller bottles, into some type of container, and then refrigerate them. Because in the event that they do break, which does happen sometimes, at least the mess will be contained in the container in which you put your swing top bottles. But in a swing top bottle like this, it's going to stay effervescent. Your fermented soda is going to stay effervescent basically indefinitely. Next from the Modern Pioneer Pantry, we're going to make an end-of-season vegetable ferment. And if you've got the cookbook, it's on page 218. This is a great recipe as the growing season winds down. If you have a kitchen garden, or if you have a friend who has a kitchen garden and shares some of their bounty with you, or you find some wonderful produce at the farmer's market or at your local grocery store that's starting to be discounted. What's so wonderful about this recipe is that you can basically use pretty much any vegetables you have on hand. And even if you don't have a particular windfall, so to speak, from a kitchen garden or the farmer's market, this can also be a clean out the crisper vegetable ferment. Just go through your crisper and see what vegetables, not past their peak, but may not be getting used up in the next few days. Time to ferment them. So what I've got here are some sliced peppers. They're the little baby multicolored peppers. I've got a few little last of the season, so to speak, cherry tomatoes from my kitchen garden. I've got some cut up carrots. I've got some flat leaf Italian parsley. I've got some red onion, and that's basically it. And I'm going to put all of these in this jar and we're going to ferment them. Then, how do you use them? Oh my goodness, they're so versatile. They're wonderful on sandwiches. My husband loves fermented vegetables on top of a sandwich. They're a wonderful side dish. They're a wonderful accompaniment. If you're doing an end of season, barbecue, people enjoy putting this on top of a hamburger. So you have a lot of options as to what you want to do with your vegetable ferment. Now, really the only ingredient that you need in addition to your vegetables and a little bit of water is some salt, and I like to use a fine ground sea salt. Whatever salt you use, I know some people like the red salt, or I guess it's called the pink salt. Any salt is fine as long as it's just salt. You don't want to use any type of salt that mentions other ingredients on the package, because such as like an anti-caking agent, because those can interfere with the fermentation process. And when we ferment, we want to be as successful as possible. So we want to use the most hospitable ingredients that will foster fermentation. Now, in addition to salt, just for flavoring, I like to add some peppercorns. Mustard seeds are also very nice. What I've got here is a pickling mix. This is wonderful too. I'm going to actually use this today. I think in the cookbook, I believe I mentioned that I'm using mustard seeds. I do that a lot, but since I had all these pickling spices, I thought this would be a good time to use some. So how I'm going to do this is just go ahead and put about a teaspoon of peppercorns in the bottom of my jar. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a teaspoon of this pickling spice in the bottom of my jar. Now I'm going to go ahead and take my fine ground sea salt, and I'm going to put it into a 1/4 cup of water. Now, there's a little bit of the pickling spice from my spoon in there. Now, this is not required. You can certainly go ahead and put the salt in your jar as you're layering in your vegetables. But sometimes I like to do this just to give everything a head start. This helps dissolve the salt without worrying about has it become fully dissolved in the jar. Alrighty, now what we're going to do is I'm just going to set that aside. I'm going to just start layering in with clean hands some of my vegetables. I put in some peppers. I'm going to put in some of these red onions, some of these carrots. Fermented carrots are wonderful. I'll put in I don't have a lot of tomatoes, so I'll go ahead and put those in. I'll layer in some of my wonderful parsley here. I'm just going to take the stems off. And then I'm just going to keep doing this until my jar is full. Now you want to leave about a 1-inch head space. That refers to the space between where the vegetables stop and the rim of the jar ends. And the reason you want to do that is as you ferment vegetables, just with it like any ferment, there's going to be a lot of development of bubbles. That's the carbon dioxide it's a byproduct of the good bacteria creating the fermentation process. So just stop when you reach sort of the end of the neck of the jar. Then you're going to take your salted water mixture and you're going to go ahead and just pour this right on top. And then I'm just going to use my spoon here to get the rest of the salt out of there. Now, all of these vegetables need to be submerged underwater. So I'm going to add under this salted water, which in essence is your brine. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a little more water in here, get the last little bits of that salt. And then I'm going to take the rest of our pitcher, and continue filling this with water until everything is covered. Now at this point, if you have a glass pickling weight or fermentation weight, you can go ahead and put that right down on top of your vegetables. That's going to help keep everything submerged under the brine, which is important to enable a successful fermentation. If you don't have that glass weight, don't worry about it. You can use any kind of little glass jar like this. Maybe you have the little tiny canning jelly jars, whatever. Maybe you have a little ramekin, the one we had the salt in, something like this. Anything will work. And you're just going to go ahead, as long as it can fit inside the jar, you're going to go ahead and use that basically as your weight. Then you want to take a lid and just screw it onto your jar. Now, there are a lot of different products made for fermentation. So if you have that device that's called a pickle pipe, or you have the one that's kind of a bubbler, whatever the case may be, you could put that on at this point. But I find this a very simple method, and what's nice is it's perfect for beginners before you make the investment into those particular fermentation products once you determine that you really love fermenting and you want to have, sort of all the bells and whistles, so to speak. But this little homemade version of fermentation equipment works beautifully. I have fermented like this for years. Now, what you're going to do is, again, you're going to put this in a nice undisturbed place in your kitchen, out of direct sunlight. Hopefully you can have a temperature somewhere between 68 degrees Fahrenheit and 72 degrees Fahrenheit. But as I said, that's just the sweet spot. If it's a little cooler, it's a little warmer, it'll still work. If it's a little cooler, the fermentation process will go slower. If it's a little warmer, the fermentation process will go a little faster. What you're going to find after a day or two is you're going to start to see bubbles. Again, that's the carbon dioxide. Fermentation is taking hold. What I recommend is that you do keep this, as I mentioned earlier in this video, you do keep this in a bowl so that as this ferments, if something does bubble over, it will go into the bowl and not make a mess. And the nice thing about using a little weight that's like a bowl or a jar, this will fill often with the overflow that is good at catching some of that as well. But just as a precaution, I highly recommend putting this into a bowl. Now, after the second day, and maybe if it's warm in your kitchen after the first day, as you start to see all those bubbles, all you want to do is loosen this jar. And all you have to do is once a day. Loosen the jar. You might hear whoosh, where some of the carbon dioxide will be released. Then quickly reclose it. After 7 days, there's a very good chance that your ferment will be perfect. It will have a nice little bit of effervescence to it, a nice little bit of tang, and the vegetables will still have a little bit of a crunch. Now, as you become more experienced with fermenting, you're going to become very comfortable with this whole process. But in the beginning, if you're a little nervous as to whether or not you did this correctly and if your fermentation is safe to eat, pH strips are going to become your best friend. After 7 days and you open your jar, you can take a little piece of a pH strip, just like this, and you're going to just rip it off. Now, some people get very nervous about actually putting it into the jar because they feel maybe there are chemicals on this, whatever the case may be. What you can do is simply use a clean spoon and take some of the fermentation liquid out of your ferment. Then you're going to go ahead, you're going to take your pH strip, and you're going to dip it into the salted water. And then, the brine, then you're going to take your pH meter, which is on the front here, the chart, and you're going to compare it to all of the colors here. Now, as we can see, this is a dark green. It's 5.5. This ferment's not ready, and we're not surprised by that because we just made it. But over time, this is going to change in color, and when you go to test your brine, it's going to start looking more like 4.0, 3.5, 3.0, a very pale green, kind of a mustardy yellow, and then a brighter yellow. And what you're looking for is a pH of 4.6 or lower, and then you know that bad bacteria can't live in a pH liquid that's 4.6 or lower. So pH strips can be your best friend, especially if you're new at fermentation and you want to make sure that you did things correctly. And once your ferment is all ready, as I said, a sandwich topping, a hamburger topping, a side dish. It's wonderful if you're making a homemade bruschetta and you have some sliced bread that you've toasted. Top it with this. It's a wonderful accompaniment on a charcuterie platter. It aids in digestion of cured meats and sausages and so on and so forth. So when you have a vegetable ferment on hand, you have a lot of options available to you. The recipes I shared with you today for the fermented strawberry soda and this end-of-season vegetable ferment can both be found in the Modern Pioneer Pantry, along with a whole host of other recipes for home canning, water bath, and pressure canning for drying and dehydrating, fermenting, more fermenting, freezing, and pickling, along with all of the tips and tricks for creating your Four Corners pantry. And I want to thank Melissa's Produce for inviting me to come into your home via this video, and hopefully we'll be making many recipes from this cookbook together. I look forward to it. And please let me know in the description below if you have any questions at all. I'm happy to answer them, and you can always contact me over at marysnest.com. Love and God bless.